Okay. For tonight's program, we're pleased to welcome Nathan Ives to Union Church for an in-person reprise of a program he first did remotely for the Boston Street Railway Association on the MBTA's Grand Junction branch. Nathan's program tonight will show recent activity on this somewhat mysterious line, explaining its importance to MBTA commuter rail operations. He'll also cover a little bit of the history and interesting future that the line holds, as well as sharing some common misperceptions that go along with the Grand Junction. So Nathan, welcome to Matt's Bay RE.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So once again, my name is Nathan Ives, and I'll be presenting about the Grand Junction and the trains that run there. Side note is I run a YouTube channel called Boston by Rails, where I post a lot more things about the Grand Junction and other Boston transit happenings. So if you are curious after this presentation about more things, be sure to check out Boston by Rails, which is my site on YouTube. So the Grand Junction is the name of the railroad branch owned by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, and it is currently maintained by the MBTA commuter rail. This is a photo of it. It's in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So today, it begins just south of the Boston University Bridge, which is where this little star is, and it runs up through MIT's campus to the MBTA's Boston Engine Terminal. So you might wonder why it's important. Well, it provides the only viable link between the MBTA's north and south sides, so the North Station side and the South Station side, which are separated. And the Grand Junction is the only way for trains to get between that in a convenient manner, but I'll talk a lot more about that later. A little bit of history is that in 1847, the Grand Junction built the line. The Grand Junction Railroad is who built the line, and it once stretched all the way into East Boston, which you can see over here, right near Logan Airport. It used to connect railroads in Boston's West Ports and the docks in East Boston. And just east of Chelsea Station, the line split off of the Newburyport-Rockport line, so the Boston Main's eastern route, and went on the current right-of-way of the Silver Line 3 bus for the MBTA. And it continued all the way towards the current-day Maverick station, where there were some yards and some industries and such. And so a story is in 1955, the counterweight of the Chelsea drawbridge fell off, which permanently closed that eastern portion of the Grand Junction branch. And all that remains now is the branch from Beacon Park Yard and the BU Bridge, which I just mentioned, to the Boston Engine Terminal. And there's technically it goes a little past that, but that's pretty much it. So the line in Cambridge was once surrounded by tons of industry, which included one of my favorites is the Necco wafer factory. Those little candies you can get was right in Cambridge, and it was served by the railroad. This little blue line kind of shows the rough location of the spur, and at the very end of that blue line is where the factory was located. And the line was once owned by so many different railroads, which started with the Grand Junction Railroad. There's Conrail, CSX, and even more than that. And now it's the MBTA, yeah, Boston and Albany. The list pretty much goes on. So in the 2000s, the line was still used quite frequently by CSX traffic from Beacon Park Yard to Chelsea's Coke Works industry, which is over in Everett. And a train known as B721 ran daily Beacon Park Yard service to the Coke Works over the Grand Junction. Now CSX, as you can see, this is the yard in the 2000s, and then CSX vacated the yard in 2013, and now it looks like this. It's completely empty. It's not owned by CSX. And B721, that local that ran on the Grand Junction, continued running, but from Framingham. But however, in 2018, B721 stopped running, and the Coke Works operation was given to Pan Am Railway's Boston local, and no more freight ran on the Grand Junction. All the cars came from Lawrence and Lowell. And the line is now, which used to be owned by CSX, is now owned and maintained by MassDOT. So now we can see what runs here today. So the first and most common train, which is also my favorite, is the Reedville Switcher. This train runs from Sundays to Fridays during weekdays. And on weekdays, it runs mainly at nighttime. And on Sundays, it runs during the midday. And I talk about this train a lot in my videos. It's a very fun train to see because it's always different. It's very, has lots of variety. So this train is basically a lifeline for the MBTA. It transfers all the equipment from the south side to the north side, and it uses the Grand Junction to go between those sides. So the way it operates is it's based in Reedville Yard, which is the MBTA's main switching yard for the south side. And it is where all the south side sets are assembled. So this yard right here. The basic operation is that it runs down the Fairmont line towards South Station, where at South Station right here, it switches directions, heads west on the Worcester line through Back Bay, by Fenway Park, up until the 3.3 switch. So 3.3, meaning 3.3 miles from South Station. And that location is just west of Lansdowne Station on the MBTA. And right there is where they switch onto the Grand Junction and change directions once again and head east right up here towards the Boston Engine Terminal. So at Swift Interlocking, which is this green circle, they connect with the Fitchburg line and enter the Boston Engine Terminal. And that's where they transfer their equipment to give to the north side and bring back to the south side. This is the Boston Engine Terminal, this big blue, purple, strange building in the background. I love the color of the Boston Engine Terminal. I just think it's strange, but it's very unique. I think it always has an interesting contrast with the trains in front of it. So when the Reedville switcher arrives here, this is a photo I got, a screen grab of a video I got of it back in December. It is told what track to go pick up its new cut of cars at, and it brings them back. So the cut of cars is brought and gets hooked off and is taken out of their way by another crew at BET. And then finally the switcher heads back to Reedville with a whole new cut of cars and locomotives or whatever it's taking back to the south side. So some of my favorite shots, I'm gonna go through some of the cool spots on the Grand Junction. This is Medford Street, and this is going from east to west. So from the kind of northern end to the southern end. Medford Street is right near Swift Interlocking. It's this sweeping curve, and it's always cool because you can.
It's right near the Fitchburg, right?
Yes, it's right when it comes off the Fitchburg main line, heading towards the south side, Beacon Park Yard. Yes, this is Cambridge Street. This train's going towards Boston Engine Terminal. It's the next crossing down. It's interesting because the Grand Junction used to have two tracks, and right here there's a weird curve in the track, so you can see how the trains kind of, it's like they use one track the whole way, and then they kind of switch into the right-of-way area of where the other track was, but it's all one track. So it looks very strange. And I always think it kind of makes it look like a jungle or something. It's just, it's always kind of surrounded by the bushes.
Not to mention that funky joint right in front of the local.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Excuse me. So I skipped heading down. Yes, it's very nice. On Sundays, it's the perfect time to see them. So I skipped Broadway and Binney Street because I actually don't have any shots there, but those two crossings are in between the Cambridge Street crossing and this crossing, which is Main Street. You can see these two people right here, very small, but they came up to us afterwards and asked us what was going on because they'd never seen a train on the Grand Junction, which makes sense because trains on the Grand Junction run few and far between. It's usually once a day, sometimes twice, maybe 3 times, but it could even be 0 times in a day. You can never tell when a train's going to run. And that's kind of a misconception. No one really gets when trains run here. Now, this photo is at Massachusetts Avenue. There's a pedestrian crossing just up from here. There are a lot of small pedestrian crossings for the MIT folk who need to cross the tracks. And this is a cool head-on shot because there's just west of here, there's a straightaway of at least a mile where the track doesn't curve at all. So you can see the train for a very long way coming down the Grand Junction. It takes it about 10 minutes for it to go. You can see it for about 10 minutes. This is at the Mass Storage Warehouse Facility, which is a building I really love, but they're doing, and you can also see some more people enjoying the train. They're doing something with the building right now. My friend sent me a photo a few days ago or a few weeks ago of, they sent a wrecking ball through the front half of it. So half of it's destroyed, but apparently they're doing something with it. So I don't think they're taking it down.
No, it's.
Yeah, you knew about it.
It's owned by MIT and it's being converted to the headquarters for the School of Architecture, of which I am a graduate.
Yes, so I'm not sure if that means away with the brick building or not, but
No, it does not.
oh, it does not. Okay, it does not.
Is it still
Just
going to
good.
be a Rage warehouse that's Iron Brew?
I
They'll
hope so.
they'll probably leave that on there, Tom.
I hope so. I really hope so, because I think Cambridge is such a unique, it's such a weird area. It's in, because it's just so industrial, but none of that's actually real industry anymore.
New when traffic light is red. Get the picture where it's exactly the edge works that says Rage Warehouse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I haven't gotten that angle yet, but this is the other side kind of. You can see also the huge empty right of way on the left. There's just so much space. There used to be way more tracks over here. Yes, this is Pacific Street crossing. This is Pacific Street. It's a pedestrian crossing. You can just see all the, I think there are a couple newer pedestrian crossings that were installed. And there's a giant smokestack. It's like the tracks were there first along with the industry, and everything's kind of built around it. So it's really a cool spot. This is Fort Washington Park crossing, which is currently closed because they're building some building on the other side. And you can't cross it because it's all fenced off, but they're going to reopen it sometime soon. This is a photo around the same area by Mr. Douglas Kidd, who I know is watching this. He sent me these photos. Thank you to him. This is an operation similar to the Reedville switcher, I believe, back in the day at the same crossing, and a cool Boston main switcher locomotive, 1122.
Blue by that time.
Yes.
1975, the old scheme.
Yes. This is the switcher by the BU Bridge back in the day. Another photo by Mr. Douglas Kidd. And you can see, I think this is from I believe this is from the east end of the BU Bridge. This is a photo of mine on the BU Bridge from a dock on the Charles River of the Reedville switcher heading back to the south side. And a cool fact about the BU Bridge is that people like to say it's one of the only spots in the world where you can see a plane go over a car, go over a train, go over a boat. So it's a lot to think about. Apparently it's a myth. It is true, but apparently there's many other bridges where that's the case. But it is interesting because the bridges aren't connected at all. They're not associated with each other. It's just one goes under the other. So it's definitely a unique spot. And a lot of people like walk on the bridge for fun, and the train has to honk at them because no one really knows that it's in service. This is a shot of mine of the BU Bridge from on the BU Bridge of the Grand Junction Railroad Bridge. And you can notice right here there's this gap because there used to be a second track. And I got this photo. It was in the middle of winter, so you can see a ton of geese walking on the water, which is kind of an odd sight. I always think the Charles River, the Charles River looks really cool in the winter. It's just all like speckled, and you got the new Jenga building, Boston University Jenga building over here. There's all sorts of interesting sights on the BU Bridge. It's one of my favorite spots to check out. So this is the Reedville switcher back in the day once again, another Douglas Kidd photo. And this is I think ex-Burlington locomotive. Yeah, it looks like it.
And never bothered, for years, they didn't bother to repaint it.
Yeah, if I saw that these days, I would go insane. So I think it's really cool just to see.
They didn't have much.
Yeah. Well, that's a photo near the BU Bridge on the other end.
Nathan, that engine used to run to Rockport.
Oh, really? Wow. That's awesome. Yeah. This is the 3.3 switch in the spot. So this is the Worcester Main Line, the Boston and Albany line. And this is the Reedville switcher heading back to the south side. So right here is where it all connects. It's an interesting spot because they have to wait for a timer. They're always hanging out here for a long time. Usually the crew seems to get a little impatient waiting for the hustle bustle of the Worcester line and waiting.
Line still single track here or?
It's double track, yes. So this is an interesting photo I got that kind of shows the misconceptions of the Grand Junction. This is in a Sunday afternoon, middle of the day. And this man clearly thought that trains did not run on the Grand Junction. And he was walking down the street. He had headphones on and you can see the phone in his hand. He was walking down the street. I got a video of it. You can't see it as well, though. I didn't even actually realize he was in the photo until I got home and looked at the photo. And I was like, oh, my goodness, there's a man in front of the train. So it all happened really fast. But I think it's at the Massachusetts Avenue crossing, there's no gates that come down. They're just the flashing lights. And I don't think many people expect, especially if you have headphones on, you don't hear the bells. So this man
Is that at the Mass Ave crossing?
This is at the Mass Ave crossing. Okay. Yes. So
I mean, foreshortened because of the.
Yes, he was very close to the train. I mean, it was a close call.
He get startled or not even there?
He kept walking at the same speed. Yeah, it was. And then right after he got past the train, he started jogging away because I think he was a little embarrassed. But the interesting part also is that this train is running long hood forward. So the crew might not even have had an idea that he went there because there's a lot of blind spots. So there's just a couple of like dangers and especially the misconceptions. There's been multiple crashes with cars and stuff.
Fortunately, they don't go very fast.
Yes. Fortunately, this train was going maybe 3 miles an hour. So yes. So another train that is less common is the Portland Extra. This train is like the Reedville Switcher, but for Amtrak, and it runs about 1 to 2 times per week. It usually runs at night, but every now and then, maybe a couple times a year, it runs during the daylight, which is really a treat. And every time I hear it's running, I rush over to the Grand Junction, and
It's like about 10 o'clock at night.
Yes. It transfers equipment from the Southampton Street Yard, which is Amtrak's South Side Yard, all the way to the Downeaster in Maine. So it typically runs at night, as I said, and the current operation, the equipment is hooked onto the back of Downeaster train 688, which gets into North Station at 9. They have 2 crews. The second crew will go on to the extra locomotive and take it to the south side, head down the Grand Junction, go to Southampton Street Yard. Then they'll get another set of equipment and bring it back to Maine. But every now and then, due to crew shortages or something, they have to send it on a morning train. So that's why I've seen it in the daylight every now and then. This is it on the Worcester line, shoving down the Worcester line. This was it might have been negative 10 degrees on this day. So it took a lot of me to see it, but it was definitely worth it. You can see how it's shoving back down the Worcester line. You see this is a former F40 locomotive, non-powered control unit, which is always a cool sight to see. And this is at the CP3 signals, so just east of the 3.3 switch.
Those are known as cabbages.
Yes, they are known as cabbages. So this is their returning operation. This was in maybe November of 2020, when I had nothing but time to see trains due to COVID. And this is them returning back to Maine. This is a cool shot I got of them going under the BU Bridge. I kind of accidentally got it. I was trying to get a shot where this biker guy was. They came a little bit faster than I expected, but I totally like this shot more than that shot would have been.
Yeah, you got a good shot.
Yeah, and people liked it a lot. So
it's only possible now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they have the new bike at the bike bridge. So yeah, very cool. This is you can always see the graffiti on the bridge, and this really shows the plane going over a car, going over a train, going over a boat, going over people, going over a fish, maybe. This is another operation, which is the Stone train, which is completely as needed run. I don't think one is ran in 2023 yet on the Grand Junction, not that I've known of. And these trains carry crushed ballast stone, which is used to put in between the rails to weigh down the ties and spikes. So these rocks over here. They use these new MassDOT remote controlled stone dumping cars, which are really nice. They were ordered by the commuter rail in the past 10 years. They've had them pretty recently, so they're better than the old manual dumping cars that they had to use.
Would have the date, the year build information on the other.
Oh, yes, that's a good point. Yeah. This is the Grand Junction running track on the left, which is where the MBTA stores a lot of their like side dump, flat cars and maintenance of way equipment. It spans all the way from the Memorial Drive Bridge, which is over here, to the Mass Ave crossing, and it's completely straight. So that's the straightaway I was talking about earlier. And I mean, there's a lot of just decrepit old cars that are stored over here. Some of them I've not seen moved in years, but it's every now and then I'll go back and I'll be like, oh, one of the cars is gone. So I've never seen it, but I always wonder what it's like when they move those cars around. This is an example of the stone train operation from March of 2021. The stone train in this day was scheduled to dump stone near Auburndale at a very interesting spot, which I will talk about later. And these two locomotives, which don't exist anymore, these are non-rebuilt F40s, which are now, it's funny because when I made this presentation, they were still in service, but now they are all being rebuilt. None of them are left in service. And these are the light locomotives heading towards the runaround. In this operation, they then turned at the 3.3 switch, and here they are going through Goose Park, notoriously named Goose Park because there are hundreds of geese. You can't see it in the photo, but I have a video where the geese were being very stubborn and were all in front of the train, and they blocked it. The train had to stop for maybe a minute, and just it kept blowing its horn like crazy. It was very funny.
Have the geese gotten the homeless out of there?
Oh, I don't know.
There used to be a homeless encampment there years.
Yeah. This is the Grand Junction runaround track from the Memorial Drive Bridge angle. You can see, so they dropped the other locomotive where this red circle is. It's very far away. And then this is the locomotive on the other end going to pick up the blue stone cars. And it then backed onto the stone cars, picked them up. There's a crew member right there, getting ready, doing a brake check. They pulled, there we go. They then pulled out and backed onto the locomotive. This is them on the Grand Junction Railroad Bridge. It was a very gloomy day, but I had fun once again. Always fun on the Grand Junction. This is them at the 3.3 switch area once again. And the place they were going, they were heading to the, it might be 11 dot something Riverside switch on the Green Line, which basically is 10.A Riverside switch, which is the only connection. It's a connection between the D line on the Green Line, which is it's not far from here. It's right over there. The switch is still there, so trains can easily and technically run on the Green Line. I know they did it in the 1990s when the Fenway portal flooded. Yes. And this train, the MBTA had just installed a very small spur right about here to store maintenance of way equipment. It was a couple hundred feet. It wasn't very long, and they needed stone. So it had to go onto this track first, and then it went on the spur, which kind of paralleled the bridge. But it was very cool to see a train run on there for the first time in probably a very long time. And yeah, it was definitely a unique operation. And that was back in 2021, I think. So here's a different stone train in the morning of, I might have been this day last year, actually. It was on a Wednesday morning in late June of 2022. So this was quite recently. This train was the North Side crew from the Boston Engine Terminal delivering the stone cars to the Grand Junction runaround. From the Saugus Industrial Track, which is where they load said stone cars. The locomotive is 3GS21B, say that 5 times fast, number 3248, which came from the BET, as I just said. It dropped off the cars, which on the runaround, which you can see on the left, and then it headed locomotives light back to the Boston Engine Terminal to do other things.
Is that a one-of-a-kind locomotive for the T?
For the T, it's there. It has a sister locomotive, 3249.
It has a what?
A sister locomotive. So But yeah, I think there are other models out there, but for the T, there's only 2 of them and they're not reliable at all.
Who
They-
built them and are they?
Oh gosh, Genset, I don't know,
Okay.
no, I don't. Yes, it's a Genset 3GS21B. I don't know if Genset's who made it, that might be the name of it, but they're very interesting and they've shown to not be the most reliable locomotives. They'll usually run for a few months and then they'll sit dead at the Boston Engine Terminal they were dead at the Boston Engine Terminal for maybe 8 years and they brought them back to life 2 years ago. And I have not seen them run very commonly. They just do yard work, so. And stuff like this.
Are those air conditioner units on the top there?
Air conditioner, I'm not sure, it could be a PTC system as well. I'm not quite sure. So this is the same day, right after the Genset dropped it off. This locomotive came from the south side and picked it up. And this stone train was bound for Westboro to dump stone for some reason. I think it's just old stone.
What's the locomotive number there? Nate?
That is 1028. This is actually a rebuilt F40PH3C, which is the rebuilt version of the F40 pair you saw in the last stone train a few minutes ago. So the rail train is another interesting train that runs on the Grand Junction. There are 2 types of rail trains, which is the flat car rail train. There might be a more official name to it, but that's on the left. And there's welded rail trains, which are very interesting, and that's on the right. So these photos are of a flat car rail train this past winter. It carries much smaller amounts of rails, usually for small projects. So for example, I caught its empties heading back, but in the morning it had a couple strings of rail left over from the Green Line extension. So on the Green Line extension, they didn't use some rails. They gave them to the MBTA, Keolis, and they used them over in Stoughton. So kind of a reduce, reuse, recycle type of thing. It's the exact same operation as the Stone Extra pretty much. And this is them at CP3. And that was from the Mountfort Street Bridge. This rail train was dropping off its cars at the runaround after dropping the rails in Stoughton. So this was its return trip, as I said. It dropped off the 1028 locomotive, which was on the other side, just like the stone train. And then it shoved these old, extremely rustic looking cars on the runaround. I mean, these cars look like they're on their absolute last leg. They're like wood panels falling out, and I don't know. I don't know if they should be running, but they are.
I love your shadow.
Yes.
on
Oh,
the,
yes.
Flat car there.
Thank you. Thank you. And there's another rail fan there as well, as you can see. I forgot my camera on this day, which was very unfortunate, but so these are all phone shots. This is it backing its cars on the runaround track. As I said, this is a newly rebuilt MassDOT GP40MC, and it's owned by MassDOT, but operated by the MBTA. There's 3 of these. Actually, there might be, yeah, there's 3 of these, and they were rebuilt to operate as switcher locomotives because these GP40MCs don't have the right something about the braking system to hook up to freight cars. Even though they're former freight locomotives, when they were rebuilt to be passenger locomotives, the air system was changed. So they were rebuilt to be able to do these operations. And these 3 that are in blue paint are the ones that can do that. So they released the rail cars, similar photo, and hooked back onto the 1028. Those are the rail cars on the right. And then they ran back to the Southampton Street Yard where the locomotives live. So the welded rail train is a much more interesting and obscure train. It's basically a bunch of rails welded together in continuous strings. It kind of looks like a giant spaghetti
1,440 feet long.
1,440 feet long. Thank you, Alan.
4-mile long sections.
Yeah, they're very long. This is from the BU Bridge. It's so interesting. They go with the curves of the track. And this was back in something like 2021, I believe. They have crews that sit on the back in these little chairs. That looks really fun to me. I would love to do that. And right here is where they string the rail out to be dropped on the side of the tracks. 3 to 5 of these usually run on the MBTA each year, but it really depends on the year. Like this time last year, there'd probably been already 3 that had ran. There's been no welded rail trains on the T yet this year. So it really depends. But usually if they want to go from the north to south side, they have to use the Grand Junction, which is great for me. This
They
is in
drop it and then 3 years later, they actually do
yes,
rail
they're
replacement.
yeah, they're not the most efficient thing, but this is in September of 2021 where the MBTA, this is an MBTA rail train bound for Reading, but it was brought down by CSX locomotives. And why this is so interesting is because it closely resembles the former CSX B721 operation, except that operation hadn't ran for 3-ish years. So CSX hadn't touched these tracks in 3 years, and they used their locomotives to bring it down to Boston with a MBTA, what do you call it? Someone helping the crew. Pilot, yes. So they shoved the train back into the 3.3 switch. And over here, you can see the north side work extra locomotives. They were waiting with a crew to pick up the rail train once CSX dropped it off. And then the locomotives headed back light. This totally looked like the B721 operation of days before. And this happened, it's funny because CSX, after this pilot move, was then qualified to do moves in and out of Boston. So after this, they might have done 7 moves back into Boston, where the MBTA would send off old flat cars, equipment. There was one time in this time last year where they brought 2 wide cab AC-44 locomotives down to Boston, which are the Dash 9 locomotives, something big that had not been in Boston since 2013, maybe. It was all very, very interesting and usually run during daylight, which is very fun. This is the north side work extra after picking up the cars at the BU Bridge, and they're heading north up to Reading. So this is the geometry train, which is a special MBTA extra with the Amtrak corridor clipper car in the middle, which you can see right here. It runs just about 4 times a year. It actually ran maybe last week or 2 weeks ago.
Who owns that Clipper car?
Amtrak, and they lease it to MBTA about 4 times a year.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and as per usual, it must use the Grand Junction to get between sides. It always does it on Mondays for some reason after doing the Worcester line. So you usually get it on a Monday afternoon.
Nathan, is that the replacement for a Sperry car?
It's a geometry car.
Geometry.
Nothing to do with, it's not test
Oh.
rail, just geometry.
Okay, well, yes, I guess so.
You can see that the car has some specialized equipment.
Yeah,
on
I
the
have a photo that
undercarriage.
shows it
Oh, you do?
coming up. Yeah, you'll see in a second.
And those of you who've received your your June, July call boy, Matt's picture on the cover is actually the geometry train.
Oh, right, I saw that. Yeah,
Except you can't see anything but the locomotive.
yeah. So this is last June as well. Last June was pretty busy for interesting trains. And this is them holding at CP3, waiting to reverse back up to the 3.3 switch. So they tested the branch. This is the old Heinz building. It was a Heinz owned by Heinz. They did ketchup, mustard, whatever they did there. Now it's owned by MIT as a storage and some sort of other building.
My wife's office was in there for a while.
Yeah, all sorts of functions. It's another weird thing that shows the industries around the Grand Junction. You really never know.
That's one of those pedestrian.
Yes, this is the Pacific Street crossing. Why is the geometry train called the geometry train? I see a question. It's called the geometry train. Here's a photo of the corridor clipper. It has all these, you can't see them too well, but it has all these special things. It has lasers and cameras, and it precisely checks the angles and the shapes of the tracks to make sure there's no like bumps or abnormal like cracks forming or things that would cause problems. And by doing that, it's basically safety, and it makes sure the tracks are doing well and
It checks the gauge basically.
Yeah.
And things like that.
checks the gauge, all that.
Internally. Very hard.
Yeah, okay. So,
Right.
and right here, you can also, on top, there's all these, you can't see it as well, but there's a lot of wires and things. There's photos online of the inside. It's just computers and all of this technology. It's very interesting. But yeah, it runs 4 times a year. So here's some of my, I'm gonna do a thing on a few of my best catches and moments on the Grand Junction. So this is March 31st, 2022. The New England Railroad Club held their NE Rail Tech Conference in Worcester, and they had an equipment display, which consisted of this MBTA F40PH 3C number 1074, Pan Am Railways FP9A PAR1, and MBTA genset 3248. And the train came from the Boston Engine Terminal and utilized the Grand Junction to get there. This photo, it's funny, I was getting ready for school and I was about to walk out the door for school and I saw that the train was nearby. So I sprinted over to the bridge, got a photo, hopped on the green line and made it to school right when the bell went off. So it was a perfect morning for me and very fun. This is a photo credit to Nicholas Jones on Facebook. And this is of the equipment display. This is the FP9 sitting in Worcester layover yard. It's a very cool locomotive, but there's a lot of meaning behind it now, which I'll explain in just a moment. So later in the day, the train returned from Worcester with PAR1 on the back of the consist. So technically, because right here it was heading east, but it had to shove back into the 3.3 switch. So it led the train for like 15 seconds. And that was ridiculous. I mean, it's probably never been in this area. So it's very cool. So PAR1, a bit of history about it, is formerly owned by Canadian National, and it also ran on the Conway Scenic Railroad for a while. And then it was bought by Pan Am to run their office car special train, which is basically where Pan Am's CEO and all their executives would travel. It was basically a passenger train with these locomotives on the front. It has a sister locomotive called PAR2, but it didn't run on this operation. But now Pan Am is owned by CSX, and this locomotive, here's a photo of it at the BU Bridge. This locomotive was shipped down with PAR2 to Waycross, Georgia. This is another photo of it at the Boston University Bridge. So I visited Waycross back in February. I was in Folkston, Georgia, which is a very cool spot to see trains. I stayed in a caboose. That's a story for another time though. But my friend had a drone and we flew it into public airspace, and sure enough, there were the Pan Am Railways locomotives in Georgia. And sitting right near the locomotive shop with, which one is which? That's PAR1 and that's PAR2. There's supposed plans for what they're doing with it. I've heard so many rumors that they're painting them in the Baltimore and Ohio paint scheme, or that they're actually doing nothing with them, or that they're making special holiday trains. I really don't know. I've just,
This is CSX?
yes, these are all CSX locomotives. So CSX might have something planned for them, but I've heard so many things that I'm just going to wait to see what happens, if anything happens at all. But as of now, they've been dormant for about a year in Waycross, but it's still very cool seeing this piece of home down in Georgia. So this is the story of October 18th, 2020. That might seem like a random day to you, but for me, it was the first time I ever saw trains on the Grand Junction, which is something I'd been trying to do for a year or two. Basically, we were out to see, it was completely on accident. I was out with a friend to see the Lakeshore Limited on the Worcester line, which had this Heritage Unit locomotive, 145 leading. So we saw that, we were happy, and we just started to leave when all of a sudden the Reedville switcher showed up, which I'd been trying to see for, I think, weeks before. We'd camped out nearby for hours and it never showed up. We didn't really know how to see it. And this is the 1116, which is a locomotive this is before they rebuilt it. Now it has an e-bell and LED ditch lights, but it used to have, this is a few months before they rebuilt it. And it's say original state. This is it at the BU Bridge, which is a very cool photo. It might be one of my favorite photos because it's funny, because it's the first photo I ever got of a train on the Grand Junction, but it shows a boat going under a train. And I think it's perfectly describes what I was talking about. It's perfect timing. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to get a photo like this again. So I'll take it. That's them. You can see the back of the boat again. That's the Reedville switcher heading through. This is right before, this is in early, October 18th. You could see the leaves were starting to turn. But this is the Reedville switcher returning back to the south side with one HSP 46 locomotive on the back, number 2014, which I've seen many other times on the Grand Junction, completely by coincidence, maybe 7 other times. It's just happened to be on the Reedville switcher. And I doubt I've seen the Reedville switcher more than 14 times. So like 50% chance of seeing that locomotive. But the funny thing is right after this train passed, my friend and I were kind of figuring out, we were like, oh, what are we going to do next? When all of a sudden, Amtrak's Portland Extra showed up immediately after. We'd never seen that before either. And the Portland Extra had a P42, another P42, and an NPCU cabbage car on the back, meaning it led on the Grand Junction. And you can see the nice foliage on that tree. And we chased it to the BU Bridge, and the NPCU led it, which was very cool seeing an Amtrak former F40. So former Amtrak F40 number 224 had all of its stuff ripped out, and all it has is cabbage storage and all the other stuff. So I've never seen it one of these leads since. So yeah, that's October 18th. So now is the future of the Grand Junction. As we near the very end of my presentation, there are 3 big factors that could affect the future of the Grand Junction, and it's no real telling which direction it will go. So there's the north-south rail link, which I'll speak about in a moment, the Reedville Yard rebuild or West Station. So the north-south rail link, it's a proposed project to connect the MBTA's south side to the north side. So this is a photo I grabbed from the internet. And obviously there's currently no link between the hubs except for the Grand Junction, which I've talked about all presentation. And what they would want to do is have similar to, I went to Philadelphia recently. It would kind of be like how Philadelphia runs their trains. You could run trains straight through the city, all the new locations. It's seamless. It's amazing. But
After the big, not only, well, none of us live long enough to see the north-south railroad thing. You won't live long enough to see the.
yes, exactly. It's who knows how long it'll take. It might only be a dream.
You spent $660 million on.
Yes. And this seems like even more.
That was a long time.
Yeah. But what they also want to do is build Union Station. I don't know if that would actually happen, but that would be maybe a station probably near Aquarium, that whole middle area. But for example, you could ride, say, a train from Rockport straight to Needham on this blue line, or ride a train from Cape Cod to Newburyport, beach to beach. So, there's a lot of possibilities if this were to happen, but I feel like every time it's talked about, the expected date is pushed back another 10 years. And that's an exponential rate that is not promising. The proposal, as I said, this is another cool map. It would add a tunnel. And the reason it affects the Grand Junction is because there would be no need for the Reedville switcher, Portland Extra, or anything to use the Grand Junction. So it would basically be abandoned. And all those trains could easily just take the 5-minute trip from North Station to South Station. It saves probably 45 minutes to an hour.
Work trains might be a problem.
Yes, I do believe work trains would use the Grand Junction because that storage track is there and everything. And you'd be out of the way. Yes, exactly. But this is also, who knows how many years in the future. So I doubt it'll affect me.
Let's put it this way. None of us are going to live long enough to see it. And I rather doubt that you will live long enough to
Yes,
see it.
exactly. Oh, yes.
be retired, so I don't get any traffic counts out of it.
So this is the next possibility, which is West Station, which is another thing the MBTA likes to kind of hold over our heads but not do anything about. This proposal is to put a major transit hub in the old CSX Beacon Park yard. It would have an equipment yard, and it would likely be where maybe the Reedville switcher would base their operations out of. I don't really know if that would happen, but they would definitely pick equipment up from there or something. And it's supposed to be a huge passenger station hub, and it would also incorporate passenger service onto the Grand Junction. So what they wanted to do is have trains start at West Station and go to the Grand Junction and build a stop at Kendall MIT, like under the MIT campus or something, and then have it end at North Station. All sorts of ideas, but the whole idea is to build like a whole new neighborhood, and especially to fix the choke point of I-90. The current right of way of I-90 is kind of like that, and it would totally fix that terrible exit that I'm sure we've all had to use right over here, causes so much traffic. So there's a lot of benefits to it, and it would definitely make tons of great transit-oriented development. It would help the BU campus. It would also add access. You see that they'd make tunnels to this side, so you could access Alston and Brighton without having to go all the way to Cambridge Street.
But I think Harvard wants to
Yes.
feed people into their facilities there because they're growing on the south side of the Charles. And they want to sort of rub it in BU's space.
Yes.
BU's on the south side of the BNA there.
Yes, exactly. I know Harvard, the land, I believe, I might be incorrect, but it's owned by Harvard and MassDOT in some, so that's why this would work, because MassDOT would get their station, Harvard would, and their highway, and Harvard would get their huge buildings, and so whatever. So that's West Station, which the MBTA teased actually, like in 2014, they did a whole thing with the governor about having it there. And then they put a train there, and nothing's really happened since. So this is the last part before my presentation is over. And this is the Reedville Yard rebuild, which is a proposal to rebuild the MBTA Reedville Yard. I had this photo sent to me recently by a friend. I think there's one more possibility they want to do with it. It might have been even more vast than this, but this is the one I could find. The idea is to have a major engine repair shop. The current Reedville Yard is over here, just to the right of this. This is the crew parking lot. This is a Reedville station with the Northeast corridor going right here. You got the Franklin line up here and the Fairmont line coming down here. And this is the giant, well, no, giant, it's not giant at all. This is the CSX yard, which serves ABEX and a couple industries along the line. And there's a whole dead area with just shrubs and stuff right over here. So they want to build more yard tracks and a little mechanical facility so that there would be no need to transfer equipment to the Boston Engine Terminal. So the Reedville switcher wouldn't have to exist in the same way. I mean, I'm sure major rebuilds would have to happen at the Boston Engine Terminal. So it just wouldn't happen probably every few days. And they would rebuild the locomotives on site at Reedville, and they would also store a lot more things there. And it would basically change the way that all operates. So there's really no telling what the Grand Junction will be in the future, but it sure is an interesting line. And now I open to questions. I hope you enjoyed.